What if the boy next door had a secret he never told until it was too late? Philip McKeon was America's sweetheart in the golden age of sitcoms. The smile, the charm, the fame, he had it all. Or so we thought. But behind the spotlight was a silent storm, a hidden struggle buried beneath fan mail and magazine covers. He didn't leave behind a scandal. He left behind a letter, one that broke the silence and exposed a truth too heavy for a child to carry. This isn't just another Hollywood story. This is the one we almost missed. Before the silence, there was Philip McKeon, a boy with a bright smile, a famous face, and a life millions thought they understood. He was the kid America welcomed into their homes each week, the sweet son in a hit sitcom, the face in every teen magazine, the name young fans scribbled in diaries. But behind the laugh tracks, behind the flashbulbs, Philip was quietly carrying a weight no one could see. His story didn't begin with fame or pain. It began the way so many do, in a small town with a dream and a camera. Philip Anthony McKeon was born on November 11, 1964, in Westbury, New York, a peaceful suburb on Long Island, where neighbors said hello and kids played in the yard. His mom, Barbara, stayed home to raise the children, though she'd later guide their early careers. His dad, Donald, worked as a travel agent. Together, they created a home filled with love, discipline, and quiet encouragement. Philip grew up in a household that believed in creativity and in each other. That support would prove essential, because before long, both Philip and his younger sister Nancy would step into the wild, unpredictable world of show business. The two were incredibly close. More than siblings, they were teammates. And while Nancy would eventually become a household name for her role on The Facts of Life, it was Philip who first walked through the door of fame. He was just 4 when it began. One day, his parents took him and Nancy to a local modeling audition. It was just for fun, a family outing. But talent agents saw something different. Philip had striking blue eyes, soft features, and a natural comfort in front of the lens. Suddenly, he was booking jobs, magazine spreads, national commercials, even TV spots. It was the early 1970s, a booming time for advertising. And Philip quickly became a familiar face in American households. But he wasn't just posing, he was performing, and that spark soon pulled him towards something more. Philip transitioned from print ads to live theater. He began acting in stage productions, building presence, timing, and confidence. Unlike so many child stars thrown unprepared into the spotlight, Philip was quietly, steadily growing into it. And while the cameras clicked and scripts piled up, he never gave up being a kid. He loved baseball. In 1975, he played Little League in Williamsport, Pennsylvania, home of the Little League World Series. He even played alongside future NBA star Benoit Benjamin. Even with growing fame, Philip was still a boy who loved the game, the dirt, the dugout, and the simple joy of being part of a team. But then came the moment that changed everything. One evening, 12-year-old Philip was performing in a Broadway show. In the audience was actress Linda Lavin, a respected star in both theater and television. At the time, she was preparing to lead a new sitcom for CBS called Alice, based on Martin Scorsese's 1974 film, Alice Doesn't Live Here Anymore. She saw Philip on stage and was instantly captivated. His presence, his timing, his quiet confidence. It was everything she imagined for the role of her on-screen son, Tommy Hyatt. So she made the call. Thanks to her recommendation, Philip auditioned and landed the part. He replaced Alfred Lutter, who'd played the role in the show's pilot. And just like that, a boy from Long Island became a national TV star. Alice premiered on August 31, 1976. It was an immediate hit. Over the next 9 seasons, Philip McKeon would grow up in front of America. From a wide-eyed kid to a thoughtful teenager, he became the heart of a show watched by millions. But while the audience laughed and cheered, few noticed the quiet boy behind the character, and fewer still saw the pressure building behind that perfect smile. When Alice hit television screens in August 1976, something clicked. It wasn't just another sitcom. It was comfort, familiar, real, and at the heart of it was a 12-year-old boy named Philip McKeon playing Tommy Hyatt. Every week, millions of Americans tuned in to laugh, to relate, to watch a single mom and her curious, kind-hearted son navigate life with humor and heart. And over the next 9 seasons, from 1976 to 1985, they watched Philip grow up, not behind the scenes, not off camera, but right there in their living rooms. From precocious child to reflective teenager, Philip became a symbol of innocence, a gentle presence in an often chaotic world. He wasn't loud, he wasn't flashy, but he was real, and people loved him for it. His boy-next-door charm made him a favorite in teen magazines. Posters, interviews, fan mail from every state. Girls loved him, parents approved of him, and producers saw something rare. A young actor who didn't just memorize lines, he understood them. Critics praised his comic timing. Industry insiders noticed his instincts. And twice, in 1981 and 1982, he was nominated for the Young Artist Award for Best Young Actor in a TV Series. It wasn't just popularity, it was respect. But for Philip, there was always more beneath the surface. Because growing up on camera isn't just about memorizing scripts. It's about performing emotions before you've had time to live them. And for a boy like Philip, thoughtful, quiet, introspective, that wasn't always easy. In interviews, he later reflected on the challenge of being so closely tied to one character. America knew him as Tommy Hyatt, but what happens when the world sees you as a role and not as a person? When Alice ended in 1985, Philip was 21, still young, still talented, but suddenly, he was no longer the sweet kid America had grown up with. He was a man, trying to prove that he was more than just a sitcom son. And that's when the reality hit. Casting directors couldn't see past Tommy, no matter how much he'd grown, no matter how hard he tried to evolve. He was typecast, forever frozen in the image of the boy they once adored. It was frustrating, limiting, but Philip didn't respond with bitterness. Instead, he got curious. He began paying attention to what happened behind the camera, how directors shaped scenes, how lighting changed a mood, how storylines were built. He didn't just want to act, he wanted to understand. That curiosity turned into passion, and that passion became a second career. Even as acting roles became harder to come by, Philip stayed active. In 1979, he guest starred on Chips, bringing youthful energy to a series about California Highway Patrol officers. In 1984, he popped up on Fantasy Island and The Love Boat, two beloved shows where guest roles were short but impactful. But it was 1988's Favorite Son, a political thriller miniseries that showed a different side of Philip. Gone was the sitcom smile. In its place, a young actor tackling darker, more mature material and holding his own. At the same time, he began taking roles in films, mostly lower budget, often genre-specific, but always chosen with intention. In Leadfoot, 1982, he played Tommy Russell in a quiet, made-for-TV drama. In Return to Horror High, 1987, he dove into campy horror, playing Richard Farley in a film that would become a cult favorite. From there came a string of offbeat titles: Red Surf, 1989, 976 Evil 2, 1992, Sandman, 1993, and Ghoulies 4, 1995. They weren't box office hits, but they gave Philip something mainstream Hollywood wouldn't: freedom to experiment, to take risks, to find himself again. Because for Philip, it was never just about fame, it was about storytelling. And when the roles stopped coming in front of the lens, he stepped behind it. As the spotlight dimmed on his acting career, Philip McKeon didn't chase it. He didn't beg for relevance, he simply pivoted. While many former child stars scrambled for attention or faded into tabloid tragedy, Philip did something different. He leaned into his curiosity. He started watching what happened behind the scenes, not as an outsider, but as a student. How were scenes built? How did a director make emotion come alive? Where most saw an ending, Philip saw a new beginning. In 1992, he stepped into his first major behind-the-camera role as second assistant director and co-producer of Where the Day Takes You. The film followed homeless youth navigating the harsh realities of Los Angeles. It was gritty, honest, raw, and critics noticed. It wasn't just a movie, it was a message. Philip brought a rare sensitivity to the project. After all, he knew what it meant to grow up under pressure, to feel invisible, even while being watched. The film didn't just succeed, it proved he wasn't done telling stories. He was just choosing a different lens. From there, Philip sharpened his skills behind the scenes. In Sandman, 1993, he juggled multiple roles, producing, coordinating, creating tone. Then came The Young Unknowns, 2000, a story about alienation and disconnection in the digital age, far from mainstream, but filled with emotional precision. And in 2003, he made his directorial debut. Edge of Nowhere wasn't flashy, but it was intimate, thoughtful, and emotionally grounded. Critics called it quietly powerful, and that was Philip's signature. He never shouted, he whispered truthfully. But perhaps the most surprising part of his filmmaking journey was his range. In 1994, he produced Teresa's Tattoo, a quirky crime comedy that blended dark humor and offbeat characters. Then came Murder in the First, 1995, a legal drama starring Kevin Bacon, heavy, intense, and based on real-life injustice. He followed that with The Jacket, 2005, a psychological thriller with Adrian Brody and Keira Knightley. Haunting, non-linear, emotionally disorienting. These weren't cookie-cutter films, they were risks. And Philip took them, not for fame, but for meaning. He didn't care if a film made headlines, he cared if it made people feel. But as the 2000s wore on, his name began appearing less and less in credits. Was he stepping back? Was he quietly retiring? No one really knew. Philip by then had always been intensely private. He didn't seek attention. He wasn't building a brand. He was living life on his own terms, far from red carpets, far from interviews. Even in his personal appearance, he stayed true to himself. Standing at 6'3" with dark brown hair and piercing blue eyes, he had classic Hollywood looks, but he never leaned on them. He never sold himself as a product. People who met him later in life described him the same way they did when he was young. Kind, quiet, observant, present. He didn't want to be famous anymore. He wanted to be real. And while his camera work slowed, his impact didn't fade. The films he touched, whether mainstream or obscure, reflected a man who understood stories, who understood people, and who understood Kane. But there was still something he never shared, a truth he carried long after the camera stopped rolling. As the years passed, Philip McKeon seemed to disappear, not from memory but from public view. No scandals, no interviews, no dramatic comebacks, just silence. For fans who had watched him grow up on Alice, that silence was deafening. Where had he gone? Was he still in the industry? Was he happy? Was he okay? And quietly, the questions started to grow into something else: speculation. Because Philip McKeon was good-looking, tall, kind, famous. He had the charm, the face, the public visibility, but he never married. He was never publicly seen in a romantic relationship. And in a world that feeds on assumptions, silence can sound like a confession. For years, whispers followed him. Was Philip McKeon gay? Did he have a partner? Was he hiding something? He never addressed it, not once. He didn't deny, he didn't confirm. He simply stayed quiet. Some saw that as proof, others saw it as dignity. But either way, the silence spoke louder than words. And then, on December 10, 2019, the world got an answer to a different question entirely. Philip McKeon died in Texas at the age of 55 after what was described as a long illness. His family did not disclose the cause of death. And that decision echoed how he had lived: private, respectful, quiet. But the silence didn't end there, because after his passing, something else emerged. Something that would change how fans remembered him forever. A letter. Not a suicide note, not a media statement, but a deeply personal, handwritten letter. discovered among his belongings and described by those closest to the family as shocking, heartbreaking, and illuminating. It was never made public in full, but the contents, shared privately and in whispers by those who loved him, revealed what the cameras never could. Philip had lived for decades with anxiety and depression, and it hadn't started later in life. It had begun in his teens, right around the time America started watching him on TV. He wrote that the pressure to perform, to smile on cue, to be Tommy Hyatt all the time, slowly eroded him from the inside. That behind every joke was fear, behind every laugh, loneliness. He spoke of the pain of being remembered only as a child, of being praised for something he no longer was, and of being quietly forgotten, even while his image remained frozen in reruns. But it went deeper than that. In the letter, he spoke with enormous love for his sister, Nancy McKeon. He called her his anchor and light. But he also confessed how hard it was to live in her shadow. Not because she made him feel small, but because he made himself feel unworthy. He struggled with guilt, with comparison, with the crushing weight of never feeling like he was enough. And then he said the words that stopped hearts cold. I spent so long pretending I was okay because I didn't want to disappoint anyone, because I thought if I showed how broken I was, people would turn away. There was no bitterness in his writing, no anger, just pain, soft-spoken, raw, and deeply human. He didn't accuse anyone. He didn't blame the industry. He just told the truth. And in doing so, he gave voice to something many suffer but few admit. That the performance doesn't end when the cameras stop. That sometimes the role that breaks you is the one that made you famous. The most haunting line in his letter wasn't about himself. It was about all of us. We need to stop pretending that smiles on screen mean someone is okay behind the scenes. That sentence has since become a rallying cry, shared by therapists, mental health advocates, and former child actors alike. Because Philip McKeon wasn't a cautionary tale, he was a mirror. He reminded us that being known isn't the same as being understood, that sometimes the cost of silence is everything. After his passing, Philip McKeon didn't become a headline. He didn't become a controversy. He became something rarer. A reminder. A reminder that the people we grow up watching, the ones who make us laugh, who feel like friends through the screen, are real. With fears, with shadows, with silence. And in Philip's case, his silence became his legacy. The letter he left behind has since been quoted in mental health campaigns, shared by therapists, and quietly passed among fellow actors, especially those who, like him, grew up on sets instead of playgrounds. His words, "We need to stop pretending that smiles on screen mean someone is okay behind the scenes," have become a rallying cry, not just in Hollywood, but in classrooms, in homes, in conversations that used to end in uncomfortable silence. Because the truth is, Philip's story isn't rare, but his honesty was. He didn't chase sympathy. He didn't beg to be remembered. Instead, in the final chapter of his life, he gave us something more powerful than fame: permission. Permission to feel, permission to struggle, permission to speak, even when the world tells you to smile. His sister Nancy McKeon has remained mostly silent since his passing, but those close to her say she honors him in quiet, beautiful ways, through donations to mental health organizations, attending small events anonymously, and keeping his memory alive, not in the spotlight, but in real human impact. And perhaps that's exactly how Philip would have wanted it, not with applause, but with awareness. Today, when fans revisit old episodes of Alice, they don't just see Tommy Hyatt anymore. They see the boy behind the smile, the man who grew up too fast, the artist who never stopped telling stories, even in silence. And they see themselves in his vulnerability, in his longing to be more than a role, in his quiet plea for connection. Because if there's one thing Philip McKeon taught us, it's that being known is easy, being understood takes courage, and being truly heard, even after you're gone, is the kind of legacy that never fades. So if you're watching this and something in his story feels familiar, if you've ever felt like you're carrying a weight no one can see, let this be a sign. You're not alone. Speak, share, ask for help. There is strength in softness. There is courage in truth. And sometimes, the quietest voices echo the longest. If Philip's story moved you, don't let it end here, because behind every quiet soul is a truth waiting to be heard. He didn't leave us with fame or scandal. He left us with something far more powerful, a reminder to listen, to check in, to speak up, and to make space for others to do the same. Let's carry that forward. Share this video, leave a comment, not just for us, but for someone else who might need to read your words today. And if you haven't already, subscribe for more untold stories that deserve to be heard, because behind every smile, there's a story. Let's keep telling them.